Welcome to More Than a Conversation, the podcast where we meet and have discussions with some of the most interesting people and innovative leaders in their fields from all walks of life. We will be discussing everything from politics to theology to religion to philosophy to life. Every once in a while, I may just be on here talking about whatever's in the news and whatever I think will be of interest to you. This is your host, Patrick Conley, and I hope that today will be more than a conversation for you. Welcome to More Than a Conversation. This is your host, Patrick Conley, and I am so excited to be joined by all of you today. We have a returning guest with us today, someone who you guys enjoyed immensely last time, an author who has written some incredible books. We are joined today by astronomer Hugh Ross. Dr. Ross is the founder and president of Reasons to Believe, which is an organization that's dedicated to integrating scientific fact and biblical faith. His books include Weathering Climate Change, Why the Universe is the Way It Is, and Navigating Genesis. And I'll tell you this, reasons.org is actually a regular part of my day. It is part of my everyday checklist. I go to see what new articles are on reasons.org. Dr. Ross, it's so great to have you on today. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
I was excited when I got a copy of this book. And for those of you that are listening that you want to hear Dr. Ross's background, you want to hear his story, I would encourage you to go back to the previous episode that he was on. And we're not going to talk about a lot of that today, but we're going to get right into the topic at hand. And Dr. Ross, I was excited. I opened up the mail and there was a copy of Weathering Climate Change, A Fresh Approach. And when I saw the book, I will have to say, I was interested in what you were going to have to say. I was interested in hearing your take, and I was also interested in how you were going to address the issue of climate change because it's such a hot button topic. And you are somebody, you're known for being a guy who is the respectful, quiet voice of kind Christian reason in the room. And I've seen you deal with people who were adamant in their rancor and were coming on strong. And I've seen you had a way of just navigating through it like the rudder through the waves. And here we are on a topic that is polarizing and some would say divisive. And Hugh Ross is going to talk about it. What on earth, what in the cosmos brought you to decide that you were going to talk about such a topic as climate change?
Well, in reading this scientific literature, and I read broadly, not just the climatology literature, but across all the scientific disciplines, and just recognize this issue is needlessly polarizing. It's needlessly political. So part of my motivation for writing the book is to get the politics out, get the controversy out, and really get people working together to deal with the issues that we're dealing with right now.
The idea of how divisive the topic of climate change is, and I don't want to bring the entire world into an American lens, if you will, but it is definitely a polarizing issue here in the United States, as I'm sure it is other places around the world. There are so many people that have spoken on this topic, and it is so divisive, even though you have said it's needlessly divisive. This political divide has led into something else, and it's led into a distrust of the scientific community. And many Christians have oftentimes labeled scientists, stereotyped science as a field for atheists and people who were agnostic at best. And interestingly enough, you just put an article on reasons.org a day or two ago about the idea that no, not as many people are atheists or avowed atheist as we might think in the sciences or in research science. That being said, this political divide and the distrust of science that we see, how do you see that affecting our views of climate change, affecting the seriousness with which we take climate change? How does that divide affect the way we view such a thing? And then what can we do to kind of mitigate that maybe divide and distrust?
Well, a story coming from the scientific community is that global warming is real. We're at risk of seeing significant climate instability come about, and that it's such a crisis that we need to take immediate draconian economic steps to deal with this. And that's what's causing the pushback. You're basically trying to tell people, look, if you'd all be willing to cut your standard of living by a factor 2 or 3, we can fix this problem. But it's ignoring a biblical principle. We human beings are fundamentally selfish. And so trying to motivate the world's population to cut their standard of living, their economic well-being by a factor 2 or 3 times, that's not going to sell. And even if we were to sell it to save the citizens of the United States, what's going to stop the other nations of the world from cheating? Or for that matter, what's going to stop individuals within the United States from cheating? And I also make the point that it's ignoring a second biblical principle, which is that God has commanded us human beings that we're in charge of planet Earth. We're to manage its resources for our benefit and the benefit of all other life, implying that when we run into these kinds of crises, there will be solutions that will be maximally beneficial for the ecosystem, all of the life forms on planet Earth, as well as their own economic well-being. And so I basically wrote the book saying, we're not between a rock and a hard place. There are win-win solutions where we can stabilize the climate while we boost the world economy rather than cripple the world economy, and particularly for the benefit of the poor. Now, with those kinds of solutions, what politician in his right mind is going to vote against it? I mean, this is something that I think all politicians, regardless of whether they're on the left or on the right or in the center, they're going to say, this is a no-brainer. Let's go ahead and do it. So I basically filled the book with a lot of these no-brainer win-win-win solutions where we benefit the economy, we benefit humanity, we benefit the poor, and we benefit the ecosystems, and we stabilize the climate. But I waited to write the book because I knew another part of this debate is global warming real? And so I waited until we had really reliable temperature proxies for the past 10,000 years. And so for the first time, we've got temperature data that no one can dispute. But also, I think another thing driving the debate is all the focus on carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is only one component which is threatening to drive climate instability. And basically, I argue, if all we focus on is carbon dioxide, we're going to have unintended consequences. We need to realize that we also need to pay attention to methane, to nitrous oxides, chlorofluorocarbons, and to me, the big thing that people have ignored is black carbon soot. I mean, I'm from Canada, and Canada is warming up 5 times faster than the rest of the world. And to get that factor of 5, that's not going to happen just with greenhouse gases. But we now have the data that's what's causing Canada, especially northern Canada, to warm up so rapidly is the deposition of black carbon soot that's being emitted from factories in India and China. The weather systems dump it on Canada, and with all that black carbon soot, it causes the ice and snow there to melt very rapidly.
So we can settle the question right here in the beginning of the conversation. Is global warming a hoax?
It's not a hoax. If you were to ask me that question 5 years ago, I'd say, let's wait till we got really good temperature data. We now have that temperature data, and it's revealed 2 things. Number one, we've underestimated our climate stability. The global mean climate has been way more stable than we thought 4 or 5 years ago. They used to say it was steady to within plus or minus 2 degrees centigrade. We now know with the new data, it's been stable to plus or minus 0.65 degrees, extremely stable. And that begs the question, why is it that stable? And most of my book is devoted to explaining all the fine-tuned designs that are necessary in the history of the Earth to open up this brief 9,500 year window where we have climate stability like our planet has never had before. So I'm trying to get across the point. Climate instability is the norm. The exception is the climate stability we've had for the past 9,500 years. But it also makes it clear that starting 9,000 years ago, the global mean temperature, as stable as it was, the global mean temperature was very, very slowly declining. It dropped by 1 degree centigrade over the past 9,000 years. What's causing alarm is since 1950, it's gone up by 1 degree. So we're right where we were 8,700 years ago. And the danger is if it continues to spike up by 1 degree centigrade every 70 years, we'll eventually get to a point where the global mean temperature will be so high, it'll melt the polar ice cap. And what we know from the ice age cycle, every time you melt the polar ice cap, it dumps a huge amount of snow on Siberia and Canada. And that's what brings on the next ice age. Global warming always brings on global cooling. And so if we don't want to drop into an ice age and extreme climate instability, it's in our best interest not to let the temperature go up another 2 degrees.
So we could almost describe the climate as the thermostat in my home. I can set a range, and that range, it's going to cool, it's going to heat, but it's going to stay within that range. So when we have warming, we then see the ice cap melt, then greater precipitation, which leads to more snow in regions like Siberia, which leads to more reflection of heat from the Earth's surface, which leads to cooling. And at which point, gotcha.
Yeah, there's 2 other factors. I mean, right now, the natural cycles are cooling our planet. Our rotation axis tilt is going from 24.5 down to 22.1. When that happens, the planet gets colder. And also the shape of our orbit around the sun goes from elliptical to less elliptical. It's now going towards less elliptical, which makes things colder. And so the enigma is this: the natural cycles are dramatically cooling the planet. The launch of human civilization has been dramatically warming the planet. And for 9,500 years, the two have counterbalanced one another almost perfectly. And so, people ask me, well, is it human activity that's warming the planet? The answer is yes. But until recently, it's been counterbalancing the natural cooling that's been going on. So yes, if we melt the polar ice cap and more snow falls in Canada and Siberia, that will be in sync with the natural cooling. So we're going to see a rapid drop into an extreme ice age.
So we're warming ourselves into an ice age.
That's the threat that we're under. But I basically wrote this book making the point, we can delay it. I think we can delay it maybe even for 14 or 1,500 years.
So it sounds as if, almost as if there may have been a design that lay things out so perfectly that the universe may just be the way it is to have allowed for the growth of human civilization. But now we have the science and the ability to understand things and to recognize that there are some changes that need to be. Now, you mentioned the fact that, and it's not just something you've mentioned, it really is what has created a lot of divide, the draconian measures that have been brought up, the things that need to be done, crippling the economy, a variety of level of things that don't seem to be feasible. Even just there would really be an increase in human suffering in some ways to bring about some of those measures to fruition. In your book, you mentioned, I think it was around page 20 of your book, you talked, there were actually people who want to reduce the human population. And they
Yes.
believe that is, tell me about that. Is that a real thing? Are there real serious scientists that's part of what they want to do? And then how do they plan to go about reducing the human population?
Well, that's an argument they're making, that one way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by human activity is just to have fewer people on the planet. And so they're saying, let's make birth control more effective. Actually, I don't think they're going to have to do much, because there's a lot of data showing that as the human population becomes more urbanized, the birth rate drops. As the human population becomes more educated, the birth rate drops. I mean, when I was growing up as a child, the human population was increasing at a rate of about 2%. That's now less than 1%. And in many nations of the world, they're not reproducing enough to maintain the population. So countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, actually even the United States, if you were not to take into account immigration, our population would be dropping. But what some of these global warming advocates are saying is, if we could bring the human population down from 7.5 billion to say 2 billion, that would be a huge step in pulling the greenhouse gases down. That's a big step, which means you're basically going to have to say one child per couple. If you want to have that kind of a rapid drop, that's what you're going to have to do. And then people aren't going to like that. I'm basically arguing trying to force laws into practice that people see as against their best interests. It's not the way to go. We need to provide them with an economic motivation. There's a reason why people living in cities don't want to have children. They're expensive to raise. Whereas if you have a farm, you actually make more money with more children.
Labor.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why in early America the birth rate was so high, because most Americans were involved in converting the land into farmland, and they needed children to make that viable. Now it's turned the other way around. Trying to send your child to Harvard, that's going to really hit your pocketbook pretty hard. So I don't think we need to worry about that. What concerns me more is people saying we need to get rid of all gasoline-powered cars. I mean, I live in California.
Yeah, let's talk about Gavin Newsom.
Yeah. It basically says after 2035, they're not going to let gasoline-powered cars be sold anymore. And then people are saying we need to shut down all the factories, or we need to actually try to produce all of our electricity by wind and solar power. Now, I'm all for trying to generate power without using fossil fuels, but we need to do it in a way that motivates people economically. And we need to do it in a way that doesn't have these unintended consequences. I'm not a fan of wind power. You have to burn a lot of fossil fuels to build and maintain those things. They need regular maintenance, and they kill birds. They kill tens of thousands of birds. And, solar power, well, I mean, they're talking about covering the California desert with these solar panels. That's going to disturb the ecosystem. That ecosystem there will no longer have the sunlight that it needs. And so one thing that I've hinted at in the book, but I've actually written about extensively since then, is that we really need to seriously consider thorium nuclear reactors. They're different from uranium reactors. They're different in the sense there's no possibility of a meltdown. There's no possibility that you could use the thorium reactor to make weapons. You can't make weapons out of it. It generates electricity at a price that's 100 times cheaper than what you get with uranium nuclear reactors, and it's safe. The workers there don't have to wear special gear. The miners don't have to wear special gear. You do get toxic waste, but it's totally safe to handle after 200 years, as opposed to 50,000 years with uranium. And there's actually the potential we could generate electricity with thorium nuclear reactors that would be half the price of what Canadians pay for hydroelectric power, which today is the cheapest form of energy. So, I mean, if you were to go to the citizens of the world and say, how would you like to pay only 3% of what you're now paying for energy? And they say, yeah, if I only have to pay 3%, That's more money I can spend on everything. Let's go ahead and do it. And I think in order to move fast enough, and that's what I hear from my friends who are climatologists, they say, Hugh, this is a crisis. We need to act upon it. We need to act upon it now. If you want immediate action, give people a strong economic motivation. In other words, if I can go to you and say, you know what, this is going to have a 15% return per year on your investment, you're going to say, hey, that's a lot better than what the bank is paying me. Sign me up.
So are there nations that are seriously considering going to that type of power at this point? Is it in practice? What's holding us back from going down that path?
Well, the United States actually had 2 thorium nuclear reactors back in the 1960s. They were small scale and they were abandoned because they said, we can't get nuclear weapons out of them. But now that's considered to be an advantage. And so the challenge would be to take those small reactors that actually worked and scale them up where it could produce the energy that we need. I think that could be done in a decade, where literally in 1 decade, we could get 100% of our energy from thorium nuclear reactors. And particularly for the United States, we got the 3rd largest store of thorium on the soils of our 50 states. Thorium is 3 times more abundant than uranium. And that's one thing I wrote about in the book, is that, our planet Earth is a thorium champion of the universe. And because it's so thorium rich, we have plate tectonics, we have protective magnetic field. But I also think this is something our Creator gave us, knowing that we would be in this position in the 21st century. It's like, hey, God provided us with the resources. He wants us to use it for our benefit and the benefit of all their life. That's just one of 40 solutions I talk about in the book.
Absolutely. And that's an intriguing one, particularly if you think of nations that perhaps we may be dealing with where they're trying to develop power, or are using the excuse of developing power to develop weapons and so on and so forth. What a great option. Definitely a great option there. And the book is so full of all sort of solutions and ideas and things that can be done. Now, do you agree with scientists who say that humans have caused the majority of warming through our adverse treatment of the environment?
Well, I do agree that human activity is responsible for the warming. If it wasn't, we'd be deep in an ice age right now. It's human activity that counterbalanced the natural cooling. So I don't look at our human activity as a bad thing. It's a good thing. The problem is, in the last 70 years, our technology has exponentially exploded. And with that exponential explosion has come a release of a lot more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And yet there are things we have done that have damaged the ecosystems. There's actually things we've done in the last 70 years that have benefited the ecosystems. So, for example, we've been able to restore the population of beavers, and those beavers are cleaning up our water systems. Chesapeake Bay is now much cleaner than it used to be, thanks to the beaver population starting to recover. And Canada, especially in Siberia, has seen a huge benefit from that restoration. And actually, even things like fracking, I think, has gotten bad press. It's because of fracking here in the U.S. that we're actually consuming less fossil fuels than we did 10 years ago. So I argue in the book is that we need to make judicious use of the fossil fuels to solve the problem. I mean, one thing I put in the book is we need to give the sub-Saharan peoples of Africa all the kerosene they want to burn as they see fit for free, on the condition that they work with us to replant the Sahara Desert. If we were to shrink the Sahara Desert down to 10% of its present size, the Sahara Desert could now become a grain field where they produce food for the nations of the world. That would provide an income for the North African peoples. It would soak up huge quantities of greenhouse gases, and it would restore the ecosystem for the wildlife that's there. Again, it's a win.
And the Sahara has grown, correct? It has grown over the years.
It's 10 times bigger today than it was during the days of the Roman Empire. And it's because people on the south edge have been stripping the land of vegetation for cooking fuel. So to me, what makes sense, let's use our fossil fuels to replace that vegetation and say, hey, use this instead, but help us replant the Sahara Desert. To me, that's a wise use of the fossil fuels we presently have. So rather than having a law that says nobody can use fossil fuels, let's be wise in the way we use them to solve the problem.
You mentioned the use of electric vehicles, for example, and the fossil fuel connection with wind power and so on and so forth. And it seems like without some major changes, and perhaps thorium is one of those answers, we're very well attached to fossil fuels at this point. I actually saw a picture the other day of an electric car charging at a station that was powered by a diesel generator. And I thought that was very fitting of the idea. But for example, there in California with the new mandate that's come down that no more fossil fuel vehicles, what is the actual science behind that at this point? I mean, if we all tomorrow started driving electric vehicles without a major fuel system, a core fuel change, I mean, for example, going to the thorium, without some major changes in the infrastructure, would we even be at a net positive if we were all driving electric cars?
Well, like here in California, we'd actually be worse off because most of our electricity comes from the burning of natural gas. That's about 25% efficient. I drive a gasoline-powered car that's 40% efficient. So by forcing me to buy an electric vehicle, I'm actually making the problem worse because now I'm getting my electricity from a much less efficient source. Now, if we can get the electricity, say, from water power, I mean, I got friends in Canada who they can drive their Teslas for the equivalent of 50 cents a month. That's because their electricity is so incredibly cheap because they get it from water power. But here in California, we get our electricity from burning natural gas. So actually, this mandate is counterproductive. We'd be much wiser to find another source for our electricity. And California does have water resources that we can tap, so we can go there. But the bottom line is we need something like thorium to be able to provide a way where we can get our cars moving around. I just saw a wonderful cartoon where it showed General Motors coming in with a California compliant vehicle, and it was a horse and buggy.
That's fitting. That is fitting. If we can get you and Governor Newsom in the room together, I think have a conversation and maybe you can help him come to see the light. And honestly, a lot of these things, I think none of us are naive anymore, that so many of these things are driven by political ideologies and so on and so forth, which is interesting because you are saying things, in all reality, again, we'll go back to the United States. Our political divide is often along the lines of if you are conservative, if you are quote unquote right wing, you push the idea of the environment. It's like it's not even a tertiary issue. It's just way down the list somewhere. And the left is seen as being more conscientious of the economy or of the environment and the ecosystems and so on and so forth, regardless maybe of what it does to the economy. And you're out here saying something that kind of, these solutions seem like, hey, these are common sense things that maybe don't fit within any one of those. Have you taken any fire for, kind of being this voice of reason in the room?
I've been more or less ignored. So one of the things we're trying to do is take advantage of people like you to get the word out. Because what I've noticed is when people actually look at the data, they say, wow, this just makes so much sense that we can boost the economy while at the same time we're boosting the environment. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, we got, liberals saying we have to pay attention to the environment. You've got conservatives saying we have to pay attention to the economy. What if we can do both with the same solution? I mean, absolutely. I'd love it if our politicians could actually start liking one another and working together and partnering together. I mean, let's be collaborative.
Hey, More Than a Conversation listeners, I hope that you are enjoying this conversation as much as I am, and I hope that you're getting something great out of it today. I'm just wanting to jump in here in the middle to take a moment and let you know a few ways that you can help out More Than a Conversation. First, wherever you're listening, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. That will definitely help, and that'll make sure that you get all the content. Also, if you have a way to rate, if your app allows you to give a 4-star, 5-star, whatever the rating is that's the top rating, I would so appreciate if you would go ahead and drop a rating there. That's how the aggregators and the distributors rank podcasts, and the higher the ranking you give, the more ears will be able to hear these great conversations. Thanks again, and I'm hoping that today has been more than a conversation for you. Now let's get back to it.
What a novel idea, right?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we only have an hour together today, so we don't have time to fix the political system. But, and in all reality, I think a lot for me of having my eyes open. In fact, a lot of it goes back to even you and your writing, some of your social media presence, talking about the time you like to spend in the wilderness, for lack of a better word. And my family and I were just recently blessed with the opportunity to go to Yellowstone. And we got to go to the Badlands in the Dakotas, and then we got to go to Yellowstone. We got to go to the Grand Tetons, and then we got to go to Glacier National Park. So it was an amazing trip, and we got to see such beautiful things. And part of, when we would go into those parks, and you pay the fee, and I would tell my wife everything, I have no problem paying whatever they're asking me to pay to go in to help maintain these roads, help make sure there's somebody. I have no problem with doing my part to help that along. So my children have this place to go, so I can come view creation. And you've talked a lot about the blessing of the beauty of creation and how our Creator gave us creation for the purpose of really our mental health, our well-being, to be able to escape and see the beauty. And that being said, I think part of what occurred in me during that trip was being hit again with the responsibility that we do have as believers to engage these conversations. And the time is past. And for my listeners, most of them, I know where they come down politically for the most part, and the camps they fit into. But we have to stop ignoring the issue and stop calling it a hoax and stop. At some point, there has to be a real conversation that happens. And I truly believe that your book is a great start to that. And I think for believers, it's a great resource for them to look at. You, first of all, you are coming with a different mindset, because you don't come with the humans are bad mindset. You're coming from the concept, the biblical view that humans are created in the image of God, and we're not the problem, but some of our actions are problematic. And so you talked about mitigation, and some things that I wanted my audience to hear about, and we won't go too deep into it, but I hear a lot of people talk about changing the diet of America and of the world. And some even propose that we all go completely vegan to save the planet. Is that a viable option? Is that a necessary thing? Do we need to get rid of meat if we're going to save, quote unquote, save the planet?
Well, once again, we need to provide people with a motivation. I mean, trying to tell the world's population, look, you need to go vegan. Number one, you got to be pretty well economically well off to be able to go vegan and have a healthy diet. That's not an option for the poorest people of the world. And so we need to take that into account and also recognize there are a lot of human beings that enjoy meat, and trying to tell them not to eat meat, they're going to find some way to cheat. And so basically what I propose in the book is, hey, there are some meat options where we release a whole lot less carbon dioxide and methane to the atmosphere. They taste better, they're healthier, you're going to live longer if you eat it, and it's going to be a whole lot cheaper. Again, you're providing people with win-win-win type solutions. And if you do that, you don't have to pass a draconian law. Politically, I'm in favor of the free market system. Let the free market do its job. But for it to do its job, you need to provide people with those economic incentives. So what I have in the book, for example, is a piece on maybe we should think about substituting our enjoyment of beef with ostrich meat. Ostrich meat is actually richer in the nutrients. It doesn't have all the saturated fat and the cholesterol that beef does. And it takes very little land to raise it. It releases about 2% of the greenhouse gases that cows do. And it produces these eggs. I mean, one ostrich egg is equivalent to 22 chicken eggs.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, however, ostrich farming is done well in Africa. It's not done so well here in the U.S. And the reason why is U.S., we've had beef ranching for such a long period of time that when people think about, well, the ostriches, I'm going to be able to produce ostrich meat for less than 10% of beef. So I'm going to make more money. It's a healthier meat. I'll be able to market it. But they make the mistake of thinking they can raise ostriches like they do cows. Cows are fine being left alone in a field and abandoned. Ostriches are highly social animals. They like to, commingle with one another. They especially like to commingle with human beings. So you need to kind of treat them like your pets, and then they will thrive. And you're going to make a lot of money, and people are going to be healthier. The poor are going to benefit because now meat is going to be so much cheaper. I mean, economists have estimated if we were to scale up ostrich meat production, that meat would be half the price of turkey, which currently ranks as the cheapest meat in the market. So
Wow.
You get cheap meat, you get healthy meat. The diabetics are going to love it because it's going to be very healthy for them, and it tastes great. And it's actually a redder color than beef. So it looks good too.
So everybody listening, they thought they were coming in just to hear about global warming. They thought they were going to hear maybe some astronomy, and they've got some dietary advice. We've got some investing advice. So buy an ostrich farm, invest in thorium. We've got all sorts of things. It's the variety hour with Hugh Ross today. No, lots of great things there. Obviously, especially in a nation that is as market based as we are, we're going to have that economic incentive. That's absolutely correct. Here's one that I'm interested in seeing how the economic incentive would work as I read through it. And I know that that's one of the things you talked about. If we want to get people to do it, show them a payoff. You mentioned this concept of sun shields. So I'm imagining a great interstellar canopy of sorts. Tell us about the sun shields.
Well, I'm not really a big fan of sun shields. The global warming community, climatologists, is really excited about this. This is saying, one way we can deal with global warming is put a shield between planet Earth and the sun. And, some of the cheaper proposals, let's just throw up a lot of aerosols into the stratosphere. That'll block out some sunlight. What I address in the book, however, if we don't have control over the system, it could have unintended consequences. What if we cool the planet too much? What if we don't cool it enough? And if you don't have some kind of rheostat where you can tune it up and down, you will have these unintended consequences. It's a short-term solution, but we may regret what we do. I put it in the book because there are nations of the world that say, we don't care what the other nations do, we're going to do this. So, but if you put stuff in the stratosphere, it is going to have a global impact. And if you can't control it, watch out for the unintended consequences. Earlier you mentioned the national parks. I'm a big fan of national parks. That's actually in the book. We could make our parks more beautiful and make more money off it and make it better for the ecosystem. You've talked about going to Glacier National Park. There's a lot of dead trees in Glacier National Park. And the reason why we have a lot of dead trees in our Western national parks, we do not allow any lumbering. And so what I propose in the book is we'd be better off letting the lumber companies come in the wintertime when the tourists aren't there and selectively cut down those big old trees that are in danger of dying. If we let those big old trees die, they decay and release greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And if you let a whole bunch of them die, they block out the forest cover from easy transportation with the animals. And if we were to harvest those trees before they are in danger of decaying, you can sell them for furniture and homes. And it's the biggest trees where you make the most money. But to make this work, instead of just clear cutting, you selectively harvest a few of these big trees, replant them with young trees. Those young trees are going to grow 2 to 4 times faster than the old trees, which means you'll pull more greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere. You make sure the forest is not so thick that the bark beetles take over and kill a bunch of the trees. Again, responsible lumbering will guarantee that. And so when the tourists come, they're going to see a beautiful green forest. The wildlife will love it because they can actually move around in the forest. It'll be more productive. It'll provide more food for them. Again, it's an example where everybody wins, and maybe you won't have to pay such a high entrance fee because now they're getting income from the lumbering companies that are going in there.
You know, as I was in Glacier National, there was actually a part where we were walking through a section that had been what appeared to be burned some time ago. And that brings to mind the fires that are happening right now in California. There's been a lot of finger pointing in the media. You know, everything from the current administration is responsible, which, I mean, I think we all know that there's nothing that they could have done to have changed the climate in the last 4 years to have made that happen if that were the case. But what is going on with the fires? Are these a result of climate change? Is global warming causing the planet to erupt? Or as I believe it was one of the senators said, quote unquote, Mother Nature is upset at us? What's happening? Is global warming causing those fires?
Well, global warming is a factor. I mean, the truth is that California, not just California, but Oregon and Washington have been warmer and drier than what is normal. However, I don't see it as the biggest factor. To me, the biggest factor is forest mismanagement. And particularly where I live in California, we need to recognize fires are part of the system. In fact, we wouldn't have the kind of forest we have without regular fires. The problem is we've been protecting these forests from their natural fires. And so, like where I live, the natural burn rate is once every 8 years. But because we have all these expensive homes near those forests, we basically suppress the fires. And so we get a fire about every 20 to 25 years. But now we have a really bad fire. We'd be far better off letting nature take its course and having fires every 8 years. Our ecosystem here is well designed for these repetitive fires. We actually need forest and grass fires to replenish the soil. That brings charcoal in the soil, it conditions the soil, holds more nutrients and water. And so these fires are actually an important part of the ecosystem. And again, California is famous for its sequoias and redwoods. Sequoias and redwoods cannot survive without forest fires. They actually need the forest fires to be able to reproduce. They have these cones and they will not break open and let the seeds be dispersed without fires. And because they're such fire retardant trees, the forest fire will strip away the less fire resistant trees, but leave room for the redwoods and the sequoias to survive. And it actually clears pathways for wildlife to run around. I mean, if you have all these small, fast growing trees that are not fire retardant, they basically take over the undercover, which makes it almost impossible for the wildlife to move around. It also invites things like blackberry bushes to come in. And there you really have an impenetrable barrier for the wildlife that's there.
So at some point, we have to allow some more of the natural cycle and to apply some of this science, it sounds like, to our actions and become the active stewards that we can be, because there's some human action that we can absolutely be involved in. Great stuff there. And that all those things seems like they go into more of those win-win situations that the book is full of. And I would encourage those of you that are listening to get a copy. You want to get a copy of Dr. Ross's latest book. It's called Weathering Climate Change. And this book, it's It is absolutely full of all sorts of things. It's going to be different than anything you're expecting. It's not pitching a political ideology. It's not to the left. It's not to the right. It is pitched straight down the middle, bringing only facts and a Christian worldview. And I think you will be blessed by getting a copy of Weathering Climate Change. You absolutely need to do that. Now, one of the things that's talked about, I've heard people talking about the fires, and that's blamed on global warming. And obviously, you're telling us, hey, there's some forest mismanagement that's happening, so on and so forth. Another measure that we constantly hear thrown out is the ice caps. The ice caps are melting. The ice caps are melting. The ice caps are melting. But I remember reading in your book that historically ice caps have only been around maybe 10% of
Earth's history.
Throughout Earth's history. Yeah, tell us about that. Are we putting too much into the size of the ice caps? Is that another thing that's being propagandized, I guess?
Well, I think it's being overlooked. I mean, we've had this extraordinary period of extreme climate stability, which makes it especially extraordinary. It's in the middle of an ice age cycle. And if you actually, I mean, we've only had an ice age cycle where the planet cycles between 10 and 20% ice. It's only been in the last 0.00057 part of Earth's history. So just at the very end of Earth's history have we had this. But we wouldn't have human civilization without an ice age cycle. Thanks to the ice age cycle, we have these warm interglacials where you only got 10% ice coverage, but you got a whole lot of melting ice left over from the last ice age. That's what's watering our great agricultural plains all over the world. And when ice rapidly melts at the end of every ice age, you get these two major fertilization events where you get fertilizer being dumped on the great agricultural plains. And it's that cycle of repetitive nutrient input from these fertilization events and that melting water left over from the last ice age that we can feed 7.5 billion people and all of our animals. However, when you look at the last 2.5 million years, that's the period where we've had an ice age cycle. It's characterized by extreme climate instability. And so if you look at the temperature records throughout the entire ice age, except for the last 10,000 years, it's characterized by the global mean temperature jumping up and down by 10 to 12 degrees centigrade on timescales of only 1 or 2 centuries, which explains why humans living during the last ice age could not launch civilization. The climate was way too unstable for them to be able to specialize and scale up. But the moment that the climate stabilized, human civilization was launched, and we've been able to sustain it for the past 9,700 years. And basically, I argue in the point that wouldn't happen unless you have 5 unprecedented tectonic events all happening simultaneously and 3 giant asteroids striking the Earth of just the right composition at just the right time and just the right location. This can't be a coincidence. This has all got to be part of an intelligent designer saying, I want to have billions of human beings that I can redeem unto myself.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that as we've seen the Earth go through that cooling cycle, we see human activity increase, we see a balance struck, we see that number that cannot be numbered being built to be the redeemed. What a wonderful thing when we couldn't have that number if not for population growth that could only be allowed by things being exactly the way they are. Another great conversation, Dr. Ross. Let me just say also, for those of you that are listening and you're thinking, how on earth can I buy a book by Dr. Hugh Ross and possibly understand it, possibly be able to grasp it? He is an incredible mind, and his knowledge, you listen to him talk and you go, man, I just don't know if I can do it. I don't know how approachable it is. Let me say this about the book. And Dr. Ross, your team and whoever you've got working with you, you guys have struck a great balance with this book. It is academic where it needs to be. And I'm sure for someone as deep into the world of research science as you are, there you could give us much more in that world, but you have made it academic enough to be trusted, and you have made it approachable enough to be understood. And that is incredible. So for those of you out there go, I don't know anything about science. This book is an approachable book for a general audience. And that is the beautiful thing about it. It's a topic that must be handled. It must be discussed. It must be looked at. Climate change. So you need to get over. Dr. Ross, can they grab this on reasons.org? Would that be the place to go?
They can get it at reasons.org. They can get a free chapter at reasons.org/Ross. Of course, they can go to Amazon. But yeah, reasons.org, they can get it there. And credit goes to my wife for making it approachable. We have a team of translators at Reasons to Believe that take the material our scientists write and make sure that all the non-scientists there can appreciate it. But if you go to the end of the book, you notice I give you a link to every science research paper I cite. You can go there yourself and check it out and see whether or not what we're writing about is truly credible.
Absolutely. So if you say, "Hey, I'm too highbrow in my science for an approachable text," I promise you, in the about 50 pages of endnotes, you will find all the articles that you could possibly want to dive into a well-researched, well-written book. And so get over there, go to Amazon, go wherever you get books and get your copy of Weathering Climate Change. Grab one, give it to somebody else. This is a real issue that needs to be talked about. And for those of you in my audience that are believers, we do have a responsibility to be stewards of what God has given us. Dr. Ross, I have to ask you one more question before you go. And that is, I stood in Yellowstone and I read about the Super Volcano. And I watched as the ground seemed to bubble beneath my feet. And I saw all the areas where we were warned not to walk because of the thinness there and so on and so forth. So I want to know, what's it going to be? Is it going to be the asteroid or the super volcano? Which one do we need to be the most worried about?
Well, the United States has got two super volcanoes. There's one in California and there's one in Yellowstone. And they have a super volcanic eruption about once every 700,000 years. And both of them are ringed by seismographs, so they can give us plenty of advance notice when that's going to happen. And you're wondering, when did it last happen? 700,000 years ago. However, I do think we're at greater risk from suffering a catastrophe from an asteroid collision than they are from a supervolcanic eruption. But I've told people this. We in the United States are in the most disaster-prone nation in the world. We got supervolcanoes. We get 80% of the world's tornadoes. We got hurricanes. We got earthquakes. Of all nations, we should be having a nest egg that we have in store for one of these inevitable disasters that take place. And, I live in California. We get magnitude 8 earthquakes, and we've done a lot of infrastructure placement to ensure that we survive such an event. But there's 3 places in the United States where they get magnitude 9s, and they're not prepared. And so a lot of what I put in the book is there are things that we need to prepare for. It tells us in Scripture, don't build your house on the sand, build it on the rock. And so I think the point, look, it's not just climate change on Earth we should be worried about. It's climate change on the sun we should be worried about. And the only power grid in the world that's protected from a major solar flare is the one in Quebec. We need to protect the ones here in the US. And we know it's inevitable. One of these flares is going to happen, and it'd be worth spending a few $1 billion to protect our economy from a $10 trillion hit.
Wow. Wow. All sorts of great information in the book. Speaking of the asteroid or the volcano, if we are worried about things coming from space, well, we'll just keep praying that Jupiter does its job. And if you're wondering about that, then, well, I'm not going to tell you. You need to buy some more of Dr. Ross's material. Perhaps they could probably find out about that in Why the Universe is the Way It Is, maybe. Would that be in there? Possibly
Well,
Jupiter?
it's an improbable planet, but
There
you
you
do
go.
get based in why the universe is the way it is. And again, you can
Yes.
go to reasons.org.
So all sorts of great information out there, guys. Dr. Ross, thank you for joining us. If folks want to follow you to get more material from you, I know reasons.org is the place to go. Is there anywhere else, any social media, things like that, that they can follow you?
Yes, all of our scholars at Reasons to Believe have both a Twitter site and a Facebook site. So yeah, people are welcome to engage me there.
Absolutely, guys. Once again, the book is called Weathering Climate Change, A Fresh Approach. It's by Dr. Hugh Ross. It's put out by Reasons to Believe. You can buy it wherever you get your books. You will benefit greatly from reading this book. Dr. Ross, thank you so much for coming back on More Than a Conversation. I'm so glad to have you on again. Thank you for being so generous with your time and so gracious to spend this afternoon with us. Thank you.
Well, I love the name of your show because it really is more than a conversation. You're very good at what you do. Thanks.
Well, we certainly hope it is. And once again, for everyone out there listening, we hope that today has been more than a conversation for you. Thanks again for being part of More Than a Conversation today. If you'd like more content like this, check out my blog at www.pastorconley.com. That's PASTORCONLEY.com. Again, that's PastorConley.com. I'd also love to see you join us in worship at Garden Sanctuary. If you're ever in Rock Hill, South Carolina, or the greater Charlotte area, we'd love to have you stop by and worship with us. Check us out at www.gardensanctuary.org. That's gardensanctuary.org. Until next time, I hope this has been more than a conversation.